All right, so today we got to talk about some complete and utter garbage, fake news, craziness from the CBC. And they put out a tweet saying 88% of Canadians say they approved of the country's response to the virus situation. And Brett Sears responds by saying, "This is an example of how much state-sponsored propaganda, 1.3 billion a year you can buy." And then the Pravda according to the CBC. Now again, there's many things I want to point out here. The first one being, number one, I don't believe that poll um, for many reasons. Number one, I guarantee you that 88% of people do not. I would bet every dollar I have that 88% of Canadians do not support the way that the government handled it. Number one, because I don't think the majority. I don't. I think it's probably maybe a slight majority, but nonetheless, it is impossible. It is literally impossible for it to be anything more than around 50%. I would say. Why? Because the way the government handled this when this whole situation started is literally the polar opposite to how they started handling it recently. And how do we know that? Well, at the start of this, they said don't wear masks, right? No, masks don't work, right? Now it's we need to force people to wear masks, right? And at the start of this, it's oh, borders don't work. Why do we need to shut down flights, right? Like um, now they want to keep the border to the states closed for who knows how long. And again, it doesn't matter what you think about that issue. The thing is that when this whole thing first started, they said, "Oh, borders don't work." Now it's we need to have tight border security, but only in certain circumstances, right? Like they allowed flights from China to come in for quite a while. Um, Again, so the idea that 88% can support it, what those 88% are saying is that they have no idea what's going on because you can't say that you supported the way the government handled something when the way the government went about handling whatever it is they were handling is pretty much the opposite response to how they handled it in the first place, right? It's literally impossible. Like I don't believe it because it's not possible. Because if you believe that people should be forced to wear masks, then you don't support the way the government responded to it because they told people at the start of it to not wear masks. If you don't believe in masks, then you don't support the way the government handled it because they're forcing everybody to wear masks right now, right? So the idea that the number is incredibly low. Um, but I said I think it's a slight majority in reality because number one, I think these polls are incredibly biased. I think they probably just took a poll in the GTA and or Vancouver and just yep, 88%, we're good to go. But there's no way they're polling a bunch of people in rural Alberta, or rural Saskatchewan. Like I guarantee you that's not happening. Um, so again, I think the real number is probably around 50%. Um, but that's mostly still because of the propaganda. The number should be at like 10%, but again, that's because of the propaganda, right? There's clearly a very high percent of the population, judging off the last election, that no matter what the liberals do, they will support it, right? Like it doesn't matter. And again, they'll make the same argument on the other way around, but that's not true to the same extent. I think that they're right to a smaller extent. But again, if conservatives were so partisan that they don't care about anything, they'll just vote for them no matter what, well, then they would have won the last election because Justin Trudeau was incredibly weak incumbent. He had many scandals. So again, if the conservatives were so partisan, they would have won the last election. Not to mention the PPC wouldn't exist if the conservatives were so partisan, right? So the idea that they're right to an extent. There is some people that will vote conservative no matter what, but it's not this to the same extent as the amount of people that will vote liberal no matter what. Again, so yeah, that's another thing I wanted to point out. But again, this just goes to show again, like, why in the world are we giving these people any money? Like, it doesn't make any sense. People say, oh, they're a public broadcaster. Well, who cares? Like, nobody under 50 watches the news anymore. And if you do, like, again, I don't have words for you. Like, the news in the future is going to be online. It's going to be on the internet. It's going to be through YouTube. It's going to be through social media. Like the average viewer of CBC is what, probably like 60 years old. Like again, like this is the problem too. The people point that out too. Oh, you don't really need to have much to worry about because in the future people are going to be more informed because they're not watching the mainstream media. Well, I don't think that's the case. I think if anything, the problem's going to get worse. And why is that? because social media is every bit as biased as the mainstream media is, right? Like Project Veritas has every major social media company, most of them multiple people, admitting to their bias on camera, right? Like just flat out admitting to it. And this is the problem I mean, this is one of the biggest problems when it comes to Canada is the political bias these days. Like it really needs to stop. But the problem is that I don't think that's going to happen because so many people are just so dumbed down, like so dumbed down, just no ability to think for themselves whatsoever. Like critical thinking is like, you know, sunlight to a vampire. Like it's just absolutely, insane for a lot of these people. And this is the thing too. Like I don't care. Like I watch CBC probably more than the average CBC viewer does. Like just because when I'm doing stuff, I got it on in the background, but I at least know how to take it with a grain of salt. And I'm not saying everything they say is wrong too. Like they do report some stuff that is correct, but the vast majority of it is just sheer propaganda. Like it's just sheer propaganda. And not to mention too, um, they won't report anything that will sabotage the bottom line. Any narrative that will potentially lose them money, they will not report. Any narrative that will potentially, increase help the competition, they will not support. And by the competition, I don't mean Fox News or any of these kind of things. I mean independent media, right? Like independent media. So that is the thing, and people are make that argument too when it comes to independent media too. Like, well, why are they so much better than the CBC? Well, number one, because they're not coercively funded. Like the CBC gets paid whether or not they do a good job or not. These people could literally report the exact same thing. Like robots for from now until eternity, and most people will not call for them to be defunded, and that's the problem. Um, and the other big thing too is it comes when well, corporate greed, and this is the big thing the left complains about. Um, where are you on this one, right? And this is the problem too nowadays too is that the left loves to complain about corporate greed and all that stuff, but they really only care about it when it's the oil companies, right? Like that's the only time they care about it. Or when it's the banks. But again, when it's the banks, it's because of their policies, right? Like it's them that support, giving people mortgages that can't afford it, and when inevitably massive amounts of people go defunct, well, you got to bail out the banks because if you don't, the entire financial system will collapse, right? So the solution is to simply just not give people mortgages that can't pay for them in the first place. And that's another thing that's beginning to go on again. There's a bit of a housing bubble coming up again, but that's a different story in and of itself. But again, the main point here to sum up is that there is no way that 88% of people support that. Number one, because it's literally not possible. And even if it was, I still don't think that that's the number because there's no way that that's the case because the vast majority of people I talk to do not support the lockdown measures. And of the ones who do, I mean, you look at the people who do, they support it, but only for the stuff that doesn't affect them, right? Like you look at these people, it's they want their passion or the stuff they like to do to be all right. If you're someone who likes to go out and eat, oh, it's, yeah, the restaurant should be able to open, but the gyms can't open. Or if you like to go work out, yeah, the gyms should be able to open, but the restaurant shouldn't be able to, right? But no, everybody should be able to open with reasonable precautions. By reasonable, I mean maybe they just increase the cleaning a little bit. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. Anything other than that, go about your day. And this is the thing too, like I say, that um, not to mention too, the country's response did nothing to respond to the threat of nursing homes. Right? Like if we would have taken serious precautions when it came to nursing homes and literally did nothing else, let everybody else go about their normal day, we would have had my guess is less people die. We would have had more cases, but we would have had less people die. And this is the thing too, that the average person is just so ignorant, it's not even funny. Like the average person is so ignorant, it's not even funny. So again, from an objective point of view, the government did not handle this in a good way. From an objective point, and this is the thing too, that we know that looking back, right? Like we know that looking back for sure. At the time, you could have argued that hey, hindsight's 2020, but at right now, um, And this is the thing too, that these people were asked hindsight's 2020 question. Do you support how the government responded, not how at the time? So this is the thing too, that this is just a example that just makes that question look even worse. So anyway, like I say, in a nutshell, it's not possible. It's not possible because the way that the government went about handling this from day one, for the first month or two, is literally night and day difference between how they're handling it right now. So yeah, that's basically the in a nutshell what that is. You know what I'm getting at there. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, on BitChute, and on Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.